Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to another special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr., and I am thrilled to be sitting with a bevy of fabulous guests. Today, I am sitting down with the Strides Collective. We are just with an embarrassment of riches of creative folk these days, and today is no exception. I'm going to just let these fabulous people introduce themselves to you so we can know who we're talking to. Let's start. Jonathan, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Edmondson. I am the founding artistic director of the Strides Collective, and I'm also the director of our upcoming world premiere production of Confabulation.
My name is Diaz. I'm an actor based in the Philly area, and I'm playing Grant in the production of Confabulation.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Wylde, and also an actor playing the role of Agnes in Confabulation.
Fabulous. Welcome all of you to the Full Circle table. So, first of all, you are Strides Collective. Tell me about, Jonathan, tell me about what the Strides Collective is.
Yeah, so the Strides Collective is a Philadelphia-based nonprofit queer theater company. We produce and develop work by emerging queer playwrights. We were founded in 2020 and have been doing seasons ever since. We work on new play development programs to give emerging playwrights an opportunity to develop new work for the stage, particularly focusing on queer stories. And we also produce one world premiere queer production each fall. And this upcoming production of Confabulation will be our third full in-person production that we're doing at the Hamilton Family Arts Center, which is attached to the Arden Theater Company in Old City. And the Strides Collective was really founded with the idea to provide a space for queer playwrights and queer artists, designers, to be able to explore the themes they want to explore in a room that doesn't have the same judgment as some other rooms, and just a safer space to explore and be supported in the things they want to talk about.
I love that. I love that. We need to support queer art. So is it an assumption that everyone that is a part of the Strides Collective is a member of the LGBTQ community?
In some way, yeah, definitely. We have a wide array of people who we have, like, collective members. There are 8 of us who function and do, like, the day-to-day administrative work and the producing work. And then we have folks like Rain and Kathryn who are actors in our production. So we have a rotating group of people who come in depending on what we're doing. But yeah, we traditionally work with queer artists. They self-identify usually in that group.
So tell me about this upcoming production entitled Confabulation.
Yes. So Confabulation is a world premiere play by Matt Shervkoff, who's a playwright based in New York City. We first worked with Matt a couple of years ago in our new play development program. Really loved his writing. He was working on a different play back then. And then we approached him last year to see what he was up to. And he was working on this play called Confabulation, which takes place in a support group that is for past life regressions. So folks who are experiencing some difficulties in their current life that may or may not be connected to who they were in past lives. And the group is led by this character named Agnes, who's able to guide these individuals to interact with their past lives and sort of see how that influences who they are right now. So it's really a journey of identity and figuring out what makes us special, what makes us not special, and sort of dealing with past and current and future trauma. And as the play goes on, those layers get more and more murky and things become a bit more complicated. It is a very complex sort of mental show that is so hard to describe in one sentence. I've been trying to for the past couple months and I haven't been able to figure it out. But I think that just the complexities and the nuances in the piece, which we all find really exciting and challenging as artists, I think, which makes it a very interesting piece to explore, particularly with the identity piece, obviously related to queer theater. Some of the characters in the play are queer and are sort of experiencing some journeys with that, and as it relates to their overall identity as just a human being. And ultimately it's about like human beings trying to like move forward from things that they've gone through that are difficult. So I think it's a universal story with a lot of queer elements mixed into it.
I love it. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with not being able to elevate or pitch your art. So many times, we're expected to be able to encapsulate what it's about. And sometimes you need to experience it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So let me talk to our actors really quick. Actually, not really quick. So Rain and Kathryn, tell me about the characters that you play, and anything that you had to bring from yourself into the role. Rain, let's start with you.
Sure. I play the character of Grant. Grant is sort of an anomaly compared to a lot of the characters who are in the support group, in that he has been court ordered after a misunderstanding and an assault charge outside of a gay bar. So Grant has some demons, and is sort of the skeptic among the entire group. He doesn't want to be there. He's constantly trying to get out. He doesn't think that he needs any help, despite this sort of repression around his own identity and his own sexuality, frankly. So he offers a lot of sort of cynicism and groundedness, for better or for worse, for the show.
Nice. I think I've met him before.
You probably have, yes.
Kathryn?
Agnes is sort of the ringleader of this whole thing. And working on her has been a lot of fun because she presents in 3 different ways throughout the play. And that's given me, a particular vehicle for articulating the ways that we change through our lives and the ways that we change in our relationships to each other. And it's been really interesting to explore that dynamic throughout this play. It's interesting because I'm the group leader and I am a support group leader in real life, so I've been able to bring some of that. But by the end, I'm also the main character's mother, and I've been a mother and I have adult children. So it's interesting to also bring that into the dynamic and to see how they do overlap and kind of speak into the same space. I am both a better support group leader and a better mother because I fill each of those other roles in real life.
Nice. That actually brings me to my next question. I was going to say, like, is there anything that you learned about yourself after immersing yourself in this project?
I don't know if I've necessarily learned anything about myself because I've done a lot of self-discovery over recent years, but it's been interesting to poke into that space of being particularly the distant cold mother, and how close to home that is, despite not thinking of myself that way. So it's been a little self-confrontational there.
I would say for me, anything that I've learned would be most taken from the other characters in the show, because Grant is, I suppose, the least introspective out of all of the characters, and the least interested in investing the vehicle in which we are sort of exploring these ideas. Though he does offer a lot of, to me, intriguing kind of dynamics around the idea of accountability, and just by virtue of what it is that he's going through. To me, he's offered some interesting thoughts around like whether anyone needs somebody else to take accountability in order for you to move on from a given situation. So whether someone has wronged you, whether someone has traumatized you, or you feel someone is accountable for your own hurt, do we need that person to own up and to apologize for that thing in order for us to make peace in ourselves? That's been a really interesting piece that I think, once again, for better or for worse, looking at Grant and his character and what it is that he's working through, has sort of offered me in my own life.
Nice. Jonathan, how about you? Any things you've learned about yourself from your role in this project?
Yeah, it's definitely like that idea that Rain was just talking about, needing this sort of something from someone else to move on, sort of permission from somebody else, or like seeking this approval or whatever it is really, I think, been very interesting for me to be introspective about. And just this idea of like being able to move forward from something, and even if it's like a really small step moving forward, like how you do that and how you push forward through things, and like, is it actually like, do you actually need anything from anybody else? And if you do get that, how does it actually feel? Because it never feels as good like in your head when you finally have that confrontation with someone and then you leave and you're like, well, I still feel bad. And I still don't feel like I've done anything, because it kind of comes from within ourselves. So I think the show takes like a really, really hard, at times bleak look at how difficult like being alive is and having relationships is. And it's not always the most uplifting thing to like think about those things all the time. But it's really human and it's real. And I think that's what's interesting about it. I know it has challenged me as like an artist and a leader and a director to sort of dig into this type of material that is a bit more like introspective and more just like complex than some other pieces I've worked on, and really tackle things that are like bleak and not super fun to talk about. So I've been pushed in ways that have been surprising to me, even though this is something that I knew we were going to be working on. Because it's a world premiere, the also like unique challenge is that it's the first time the play is being produced ever for anybody. So the playwright's also working on the script as we're working on it too. So things have changed quite a lot over the last like year, especially since this cast was brought on like in the early summer. So we've all had to roll with the changes as well. And it's exciting to make those changes, but also like really daunting. So as an artist, I think I've learned a lot about how to navigate that process of just having suddenly like a new scene or like an entirely rewritten scene from the thing that you read before, and working with that on the fly is just something you don't get if you're not working on a world premiere. If you're doing an established play, you just have what it is and you can't change anything. And here we're like, great, this word isn't working. Let's suggest something else, or let's bring the playwright in to like write us a new sentence to like bridge this thing. And it's really awesome, and also like very overwhelming, that you don't just know from like day one how you're going to get from A to Z. You're like, well, it's A to Z for now. And like, we've had so many drafts of this play, we've lost count. So that's very, very interesting and unique to this process.
And, that's the good thing about being a queer collective, because if nothing else, we are resilient and adaptive.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And, I appreciate the introspective nature of this work because, we're each individually and together approaching life, as outsiders, even if we have, a supportive family or support group or chosen family, because, you might be the only one in your circle who comes from a supportive family, or your situation might be completely different from everyone else, and we all have that unique thing as a queer collective of people that we're the outliers even in the most normal circumstances. So I appreciate the fact that we get to take this moment to see moments of introspection. So, which, talk to me about how important it is to be a collective of artists who, uplift queer art and tell queer stories. Why is that important?
Well, I mean, I have like my thoughts of like making the space with Kat and Rain. I'd be interested, like, coming into us to join this process. Like, how's it been for y'all to like join? I know this obviously isn't always the case where you're working with a team of predominantly queer folk on a queer play. So you may have a more interesting perspective than I do on it from the outside in.
I guess one of the things that stood out to me, like often when you're in theater spaces, there are other queer people, so you don't necessarily feel alone. It's usually a fairly diverse group. But in this in particular, it's like so present we don't have to talk about it, if that makes sense. It's,
Right.
yeah, it's just sort of a different cozy space where nobody, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'll work off of like one of the things I like in the script is one, the fluidity of people as their relationships and their relationship with their self and their relationship with other people is changing. I think that happens in life, and it's nice to see it within the context of a single story. But also there's nothing confrontational really about the queerness. Like, yes, the one character's incident is kind of incited, Grant's character, by a perception that there's, an anti-queer thing, but everybody's just sort of existing. Nobody's defending their queerness. It just is.
Right.
And I like that.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, I think it's clear that despite Strides being such a new collective, that there is such a clear vision for what it is that everyone is trying to achieve, and everyone takes their work very seriously. And yeah, I feel like that there's such a supportive nature that I think is probably probably sort of there seems to be such a supportive nature that I think is sort of innate to the group of folks that are coming together, that you don't always find, frankly, in a lot of theater spaces or a lot of professional creative spaces in general. So that's been really lovely to be a part of.
Yeah, I think like that innate understanding, the sort of unspokenness that just is there is so lovely. Doing work where like the characters aren't fighting for their lives because of their identity is refreshing. Like the main character Caroline is queer and it just is a fact. She has a lot of other trauma going on and a lot of other history, but like her sexuality, it's sure it's all like imbued in there, right? But like it's not the inciting incident of the play. It's not the main motivational factor. And the people around Caroline don't blink an eye. And the same thing with other characters when they delve into that identity too. Nobody blinks an eye at anything. So the sort of the quote unquote normalizing of that in the narrative is really refreshing because we just don't see that a lot in media. Like when queer stories are on stage or on film or whatever, it's usually there's something hateful happening or very, very difficult related to it.
Right.
And we try as a collective to like find stories that aren't always just about that. It's very real, obviously. Like you don't want to shy away from just like the realness of what we all go through, but also we see so much of it, we live it. So like to live something else is nice. To just like play queer on stage and like have other issues is also like real. So that I think is something that is unique to us, and we also like we clearly have like a goal and a vision, and theater costs money, and there's the business side of it, which is like boring, but is unfortunately like a thing to keep in mind that we have to because things cost money. But I think prioritizing like humanity and creativity and fun as much as we can over anything else is really important too. And constantly trying to remind ourselves that like that is why we're here and that's what we want to do with our time. Because none of us are doing this for full-time jobs by any means at all. We're all working other jobs and doing this on the side. So like trying to emphasize the humanity always, I think is something that is really, really important. And hopefully is how folks feel working with us and working on this process, is that, we're all there for each other and are like the same team working on something really supportive. And I think that speaks to the like larger idea of like queer chosen family and just communities and stuff. Like there is just that vibe as we were building this little community, like working on a show between designers and actors and everybody. And it's fun to see it all like come together and just have that supportive space. And yeah, it's nice.
I love that. Like, Martha refers to that as, the shorthand. We have a shorthand with each other that we know where each other is coming from, so we don't need to start at square one with exposition. And I do like that. And I like that you mentioned, you're telling queer stories, but the queerness is not necessarily the focal point of the work. It's not a very special episode of, you know what I mean? I do appreciate that. Which brings me to a question that is, it's a topic that's kind of a hot button now. So, how do we feel about um, non-queer actors taking on queer roles? Like, I personally like, of course, the best actor should get the gig. However, why do we act like there's like four queer people on the planet, and if the role doesn't fit those four people, let's give it to Brendan Fraser. You know what I mean? So how do we feel about that?
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I mean, we're on such a small scale here with what we're doing, so it's like there's obviously such a difference of like thinking about what's at stake for like our show versus a $200 million like Hollywood film,
Right, because Philly's slopping over with queer folks, so that's not the same issue. I get that.
Yeah. But it is something that is, I think, it's obviously, of course, for us, since we're a queer theater collective, it's on our minds always. But it's interesting because we do sort of, just like when we put out a casting call for our shows, we give as much information as possible about the show and about the characters. We say like what pronouns are used in the script for the characters, and we ask folks to just submit for roles that they would feel comfortable playing, because we don't, it's far be it from us on the other side to prescribe anything. So we just say, like, if you want to submit with what you're comfortable with, and then once we're starting to work with people and in the team, we can see. So we try to approach it that way. I do think that there's no denying that, like, and obviously Kat and Rain can speak even more to this than I can as actors in this particular show, but like, you bring your lived experience to the roles you're doing, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but like you always do, because you are when you step off stage, like, you're back to being yourself, right? So there's no denying that. So there, and I think there's a shorthand we talked about. There's also a sort of like, if you had to give everyone the backs, like, if someone had never come out, for example, or dealt with anything like that, then having to sort of like go and tell an actor about that, like, I don't know, it would be different. It would just be different. It would just be different to work with an actor who hadn't had that experience versus someone who has had that experience. And you don't even, like Kat said, it's just like unspoken. It's just sort of like, is what it is. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. As I don't know, Rain or Kat, if you have any thoughts as folks portraying people on this show, but
I don't know. I think this is a question that like, having representation is just such an important question all around. And Brendan Fraser specifically, like, yeah, I saw The Whale and was like, why didn't they give an opportunity to a heavier actor instead of picking a big name and CGIing it? And yeah, lived experience is part of it, and you can't, I mean, yes, you can, it's our job as actors to kind of find those experiences we don't relate to and find ways to relate to them and connect to them and make them real and lived. Um, but there's a nuance that I think an actor with lived experience is likely to bring, that another actor isn't. And I think a lot of it right now is just the representation is so important. Like, yes, maybe in 100 years, we've got straight people playing queer people and nobody cares because there's plenty of roles for everybody to go around. But I think right now, as an actor, being able to be visible about my queerness in this way is important to me,
Mm-hmm.
um, and is a component of it.
But yeah, like the two examples that Martha and I use when we have this conversation are Coleman Domingo in Rustin versus Brendan Fraser in The Whale. because when Brendan Fraser got his award, he talked about how this was a universal story, but I call bullshit because a straight person in this scenario isn't being ostracized and losing his family because he's straight. So, that's cute and everything. Whereas Coleman Domingo, there were certain nuances and inflections and body postures that you can't teach that. There's no method for that. You have to, or you don't. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. And I guess my personal stance on that is, again, all things being equal, the role should go to the best actor, but give queer actors right of first refusal, before we widen the pot, because, don't have a DEI department and then immediately go to a straight person for a queer role. That's just me. So, where do we see Strides Collective? This might be an odd question, but where do we see Strides Collective as part of the greater Philadelphia theater tapestry? Like, there's definitely room for plenty more queer-centric work, whether that be the subject matter or, just focusing in terms of who is on and behind the stage. Like, where do we see ourselves in the Philadelphia art scene?
That's a good question. I think we're constantly finding our footing, and I think evolving year over year, since we are so new, and next year is our 5th year. So we evolve a lot as a company. And I think the more that we produce work and the more that people know us, the more that we're getting ingrained in the community, which is really awesome. We don't have a physical space. We just rent spaces. So we don't have a physical presence anywhere in the city, which is cool because then we can sort of hop around the different neighborhoods and produce work in different communities, which is really awesome. And it doesn't tie us down to anything in particular. But it's also hard because we don't have a place people can it's not like we're the Walnut or the Wilma where people know exactly where we are and they can come to our shows, year round. So in terms of physically being in the community, it's still sort of a work in progress as we just get people to know that we exist. But I think that of course, the queerness of everything we've talked about, but I think something else that we've been able to start offering is a place for emerging artists who are maybe newer to what they're doing or out of college or just moved to the city, who don't know a lot of people. We actually work with a lot of folks who are sort of new to Philadelphia. And the work we're doing is at a scale that's in a way that you can hold other jobs. I work full time in a different position than what I do now. So you can have another job, but you can still practice your art and get paid something for it, and work on a semi-professional level without being in a union. So there's a little bit of a bridge, I think, between doing community theater, and then there's us, what we're doing, and then there's the Wilma, the Walnut, the Arden, who's producing 7 shows a week for equity pay and union pay. So I think we're able to provide that space for people to sort of cut their teeth and be a full set designer for us and be a full lighting designer and act in a lead role, as opposed to maybe interning in those departments or understudying at a larger institution. We're able to provide those opportunities.
I love that.
Which is something that, again, it's all scalable and it's still small scale and it's not the right fit for everybody, but we're able to do things on a little bigger scale and have a bit of a reach because of, the fact that we are a nonprofit and we've been around and we have a little bit of a following. So that I think is something that I really love that we're able to do. Because I know when I graduated from college and sort of looked around, I was what do I do now? The big theaters aren't going to hire me. No way. I have no experience. Right. So it's where do I go? And community theater is awesome. I direct in community theater too. So absolutely no shade to community theater, but it's nice to have a different thing where you're doing world premiere plays too, which is totally different. Community theater, you're just usually not getting that. Sometimes you do, but usually it's, more classics and stuff. So to be able to provide that space, I think is something that excites me and something I wish that I had, which is part of the reason that we wanted to start in the first place, is to provide that opportunity for people.
I love that. It's like a bridge.
Yeah, I think so. And hopefully, right. We've already had some folks who've done shows with us go on to work at those theater companies I just mentioned. And I think that everyone I work with and who's on this show deserves all of that attention and jobs and stuff, of course. So hopefully that happens with everybody. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of a bridge and in a nice way to support people.
I dig it.
I totally agree. I mean, as someone who has moved to Philly not long ago, just shy of 2 years now, this gig came at a really lovely time for me, as I have been auditioning for every single theater company and coming up against that inevitable actor thing of like, wow, it's really hard to break in. And Strides and Jonathan took a chance on me as someone who was new, who didn't have much on my resume, and it's been really affirming in a lot of ways. Obviously, because a job is a job, and it's affirming to be led into any creative space and to get to do what you love. And also, yeah, for the reasons that Jonathan is mentioning, because I find this work really important and have felt really embraced creatively, um, and also that like Strides sort of being who they are and um, allowing to giving themselves permission to take up space in the way that they have also made a bit of a name for themselves. And so I'm hopeful that plenty of Philly theater folks, whether they're directors or playwrights or artistic directors, come to the show and you see the work that they're doing and find it important too, and hopefully build connections with the theater artists that are working with Strides and are able to, again, bridge that sort of gap between where folks are and where they would like to be.
I'm coming from, I guess, a slightly different track. I didn't go the college route. I jokingly say that I got my bachelor's in community theater. I sort of cut my teeth there and have been, sitting here in the semi-pro kind of uh, area for a little bit, kind of looking at, I'm older and my place in life and where I see the myself and the industry working together are maybe a little different. I'm more in a space of I've come into owning myself as an artist. Now, what do I want to do with that power? What do I want to do with this voice? And um, yeah, I think Strides has been out there as kind of a beacon. I've seen them on the audition boards and existing in the community and putting stuff on for a few years. And I'm excited to finally, I feel like, like I got on the island. And have seen Strides as sort of this rising beacon for the queer theater community to say like, hey, we're here and we're trying to do something with this voice that we have. We're creating a space where we want to say something, and what do y'all want to speak into it, and what can we find to do there? And I think that's really exciting. And very much in line with where I'm trying to go with, okay, I'm a queer artist with a voice. What do I want to do with that? What do I want the world to know? And yeah, excited to be in this space together.
I love that. And, from where I sit, Strides is definitely a place that is indicative of the DIY-ness and the lean and meanness that is the Philly arts community. I do love the fact that you serve as both a company that is putting forth serious work, but it's also sits in that sweet spot where you can have a production on your resume that can boost you to quote unquote bigger things, but at the same time growing yourself as an entity. I love that. It reminds me of what feels like a lifetime ago. I produced something called the Etc. Performance Series at the CEC. And it was basically an opportunity for artists of all genres of performing art to be able to get their work seen in front of an audience. And, you got actual lighting and promotion and marketing. And it gave you something to be able to show, like something professional looking to be able to show. if you weren't in that space of like being in an actual company or something, or an actual theater. So I love that this feels like that community oriented, but still like a significant force. I'm digging that. I'm digging that.
Yeah,
Props
totally.
to Strides Collective.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. It's not easy because there's the business side of it and there's the resources and all of that. So we
Sure.
come up against a lot. But yeah, getting people to see the work is like the most important, because it's like once you see the work, hopefully you love it. Even if you don't love it, hopefully you appreciate it for what it is, right? You know, not everyone loves everything, but getting people just in the door is hard. So even just having a little bit of a following is helpful to have that, at least as the like, now we've done a couple shows, so people are like, oh, like I want to see whatever Strides is doing, the same way that like the larger theaters in the city have like their following, right? So if we can keep building that, and have, you know, good products and stuff, hopefully people will continue to come, because there's, I mean, industry wide right now, it's very hard to get people to come see theater, unfortunately. So small and big theaters are experiencing that for sure. But it does hit small theaters really hard because, you know, we only do one full production a year. So this is our opportunity to make an impact in the community, and also, you know, ticket sales. Just, you know, we need people to come see our work, so we can keep doing it. You know, we're a nonprofit, so all it does is just regenerate our, you know, go right back into the work for next year, because we want to keep doing it. But in order to do that, we got to have people who support us, and we do. We have lovely supporters right now, but of course, we'd also like to grow as we get bigger and provide more opportunities, which we can only do with, you know, access to funding and access to space. Space as a resource I don't think people realize is like so scarce in Philly, that we're not just rehearsing in like a broom closet somewhere, that we're rehearsing that has a little bit of space and like something that's like nice for 5 people, you know, and then performing as well. So there's all of those business decisions that I knew going into this would be difficult, but then the realities of it day to day, it's like, oh yeah, this is a thing I have to always think about. I wish I could just like live in the dreamy art of it all the time. And I do, and I allow myself to live in the dreamy art, but then, you know, the reality sets back into, it's like, okay, we got to also, you know, sell some tickets to the show.
I know how
But
it
the
goes.
dreamy art part is what keeps, I think, everybody going, and why like we're all here. And the, you know, the mission of the company, I think, is what leads us to it no matter what.
So wait, you said Strides began in 2020, is that what I heard?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So that was, you know, for obvious reasons, crazy year to be an artist.
Yeah.
I can't imagine starting an entity. Yeah, so how crazy was that?
Well, I think we had just, I'm a playwright as well, and I had been self-producing my work for a few years, and then had a show that had like minor success at the Jersey Fringe Festival, which doesn't really exist anymore, but did exist. And then we wanted to bring it to Philly. It was a 2-hander, so we wanted to keep the same cast. And then I asked some of my friends to help produce it, make it a little bit bigger. So we did that in February of 2020 when Theater Philadelphia did, I think it was their first or second Philly Theater Week. We were a part of that. So we were like, and it was like really fun, and like people came and liked it, and like we had a good time, and we were like so energized to like meet. And I think we like literally had like a meeting, like the show closed in February, and I think we like had a meeting on the calendar for like March 13th, like literally like the day like Broadway shut down. So then we were like, we should probably cancel the meeting, and the meeting was going to be about like what we were going to do next. And then, you know, blah, blah, blah. Everyone knows what happens after that. So
Right.
I think like we were like on the cusp of about to officially be the Strides Collective. And then we put it on pause, and then like the summer happened, and then we sort of revisited it, and we were all at home. You know, a lot of us like were laid off from jobs or on furlough or whatever. So you're sort of like losing our minds, like you know, and we're like, well, let's try to like channel all of like, and then, you know, the world at large, obviously, as well. So there's just so much going on. So those of us who felt like we wanted to do something about everything, we're like, let's just get together and start like trying to plan this. And it actually ended up being like all of like the boring paperwork part of it all. We had time because we were just like at
Right.
home. So, you know, I don't know if I would have had the capacity to build the team and do all the filing and all of that stuff if I didn't get furloughed from my full-time job, which I'm not thankful for, but like it was just the reality, right? So there's a little bit of space, but yes, starting the company and then trying to get people to like do anything virtually was hard. And then but at least we had the foundation, so when theaters were ready to open, we had already had like 10 to 12 months under our belt of like doing some stuff together that we knew each other, and like I think we're ready to like then start right away. I think it would have taken us longer to do our first in-person production if we hadn't had that like runway of at least working together and getting like mission, vision, values, and like all of that stuff, because that all could be done like virtually. So that was like healthy conversations, and we could really like sink our teeth into all of that without the. But then we were like, well, we're no rush to do a show because we can't do a theater right now. So we just sort of like allowed ourselves time to do that stuff, which was I think really good work that we did and helped obviously set the foundation for what we are now. And then we came back and then we started, doing stuff, and now it's a couple years later. So,
So
yeah, it was an interesting time, but yeah.
Well, that is one thing about being an artist, and feel free to agree or disagree, but I feel like that time, if you were already a working artist in whatever capacity, you were able to appreciate being a process driven creator as opposed to a product driven creator. Like, we all learned to embrace the process because the hell other choice did you have? And I imagine, we all learned a lot about, what our individual processes were, what worked, what didn't, what could be. Like, do we all feel like we came out on the other side as, if not better, at least different artists?
Definitely different, for sure. I think it started my personal journey of like shifting how I view opportunities and gigs and how I want to spend my time. I think that suddenly came into focus of like how precious time is and how quickly it can all be taken away, because it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then suddenly it was like the hustle culture of it, of taking gig after gig and just doing all this stuff, just stopped. And then it was like, well, let me actually reflect to be like, why am I doing this? Like, do I actually want to say yes to this gig that's like an hour and a half away from my house that pays me like $20? Like, is it creatively worth it? And if it is, then how do I manage that with so I just think it gave me that, personally speaking, that just gave me that opportunity to reflect and then, think about how I want to move forward in my like creative journey while I balance everything else. Because that idea that I had, I'm sure it's like so many people, I had like wonderful like jobs lined up, like directing jobs lined up for like late 2020 and early 2021, and then that I worked really hard to get and were like going to be like really good gigs, and then they were just gone and they never came back. And I never, it's 4 years later, and it's not like I didn't get them again. It was just like right time, right place, and then suddenly wrong time, wrong place.
Right.
So the idea that could be taken away like that was like, well, that's hard. So you sort of start to reevaluate of like how you really want to be spending your time. And on things. And I know obviously everyone's situations are different. So I don't know, Rain and Kathryn, how you all navigated that, but it was definitely a shock to my system of just going, and then suddenly being like, nope. And then for the foreseeable future, which ended up being a long future, there was just like nothing. Very different, very hard.
For me, COVID was the reset that I needed. I had actually literally, like 2 weeks before the world shut down, decided that I didn't want to run the business I was running anymore. And I was trying to do construction, and I just like put down a sanding sponge one day and said, I quit. I'm going to go call my mom. And walked away from it, and I had no idea what was coming next. I had a training for something else scheduled like the day the world stopped. So that got canceled. I did have some creative projects going on. Most of them did actually happen post COVID. But it gave me the time and the space and the financial resources, not going to lie, to reset my life. And I came out of COVID with some money in the bank and a plan, and was just like, I'm leaning into this. I didn't have any job prospects at the time. I found something that is blissfully part-time and gives me lots of freedom to focus on my creativity. And yeah, I mean, COVID was a tragedy, but a lot of us were able to turn it into a win, and I did.
Yeah, I have probably a unique experience in that I was in school still, and fulfilled half of my schooling during the pandemic, like peak pandemic as well. And so, yeah, I have a lot of feelings about it, I think, that are very specific and tied to um, the education system in America and what it's like to pursue the arts.
Well,
Yep. And that's a story for another podcast, I think. But
yeah, that's its own episode show.
it really is. Though, yeah, I mean, it's all about learning, right? And I do think that if the pandemic offered us anything positive, that um, is that it was a time for us to sort of learn and take stock in where we were at in our lives. And while I was still really young and having to navigate school and again reevaluate with why it was that I wanted to be an artist in the first place, um, I learned a lot, which I am really grateful for.
Yeah, I think if you, I'm like, my superpower is finding the silver lining in anything. If there is one silver lining to be found, I feel like we as people in general, but artists in particular, learned what we are and are not willing to go back to.
Mhm.
You know, like things that weren't really working before, but we were just like going with the flow because that's the way it's always been. Once you step out of that, it's like, why go back to that? It wasn't really working before. We're going to do, and I'm not willing to sacrifice my soul again. You know what I mean? Like so many of us re-entered the world on our own damn terms, and I love that. I love that. And I do feel like the artistry in across the board from what I've seen, Philadelphia in particular, but in general, has got this new sense of purity, for lack of a better word, authenticity, because we all had the opportunity to sit with ourselves and, you know, discover or rediscover ourselves and who we are, who we aren't, who we want to be. And I feel like that's how we move forward now. Power structures are different, you know, and folks at the quote unquote top are shaking in their boots because folks aren't willing to do what we were willing to do before necessarily, you know, and I love it. I think it's the first steps toward revolution.
Yeah, that was also one of the beautiful things about starting the collective during that time was there were so many conversations happening within the theater industry and also just the world at large, of course, that like when the collective came together to talk, we were like, we can make this like whatever we want it to be because we're starting at zero. And it was felt like just a really like generative time to start at zero and think about all the things that like were not working for us in other places and like what we wanted to do moving forward. And there was no obligation for us to do anything other than like what we felt we wanted to do. And that doesn't mean that we always made like the right decision every time, but it was great to just not have to uphold to like 30 years of history somewhere or whatever. It was like, we'll just do what starting now and forward, we want, you know, make this what we want to make it. And that was really like liberating for a lot of us who were coming from other jobs and places that, you know, were a bit less than ideal for us, and able to start creating something that we felt was a little bit better for the time we're living in and the people that we want to work with. And it's a work in progress always. Like, we're always evolving, always thinking of ways to make things better, safer, happier, more fun, you know, more professional, you know, all the things. But I'd rather be starting at that place than having to start with, you know, the old ways that just weren't working. So that was definitely a plus side too of starting during that time, was starting at zero in a positive way.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. And, you know, we have these opportunities to sift through the traditions. Because there are certain traditions in art, in theater in particular, that will always be beautiful. And then there's certain traditions that, you know, we can leave by the wayside. even dumb little things like the unnecessary power struggle that is a handshake. You know what I mean? Like, I love that we decided, eh, and we get to create new traditions and rewrite our own history. I love it. I love it. I love it. So okay, confabulation. Tell us one more time where and when.
Yeah, so Confabulation starts performances Thursday, October 10th, and we run until Sunday, October 20th, at the Hamilton Family Arts Center in Old City, Philadelphia, owned by the Arden Theater Company, and we will be performing there. We have evening shows, matinee shows. Tickets are available at StarSelective.com/tickets. Various discounts and things for industry folks and students, and other tickets as well. Yeah, that's where we are. That's where we'll be for the next 2 weeks.
And I will put all that information in the notes to this episode so that everyone within the sound of our voice can take advantage and check out this wonderful performance. If we wanted to learn more about each of you, your work, where could we visit?
You can learn more about Strides at strideselective.com or follow us on Instagram at the Strides Collective. Me personally, JonathanEdmondson.com is my portfolio of my directing and playwriting work.
You could follow me on Instagram at Raindrop Diaz.
I love it. I love it. So do we have any final thoughts that we'd like to share?
We're really excited to share the show with people. It's like we said, hard to do theater, so we appreciate anyone's support. Also, taking a chance on a world premiere is difficult, but I think it can be really rewarding. So I hope that people come and enjoy it, and keep supporting small theater companies. We really need the support. And thank you, Charles, for the opportunity to speak about it, and share thoughts. It's always great to get things out there and spread the word in any way possible. So thank you for the platform.
It is indeed my pleasure.
Yeah, I've been really gratified and energized by this process, and also again, being someone who's new to the Philly area, like pleasantly surprised at how many folks seem willing to come to the show, to be honest. And I say that to say that, it's not something that I think is the experience of every industry and every theater industry in any given city. I think Philly theater artists are very willing to support each other. And it's something that I found through my time auditioning and meeting folks. And it's not something that I take for granted. So I'm really excited to share this work with folks. Really grateful for you having us, Charles. And hope that people learn from it.
My pleasure.
Thank you,
Strides
Charles.
Collective, thank you so much for joining me here at the Full Circle table. Jonathan, Rain, and Kathryn, it was a pleasure meeting you and chatting with you, and I can't wait to see everything that you all do.
Charles.
Thanks so much for having us.
Of course, thank you so much. You take care now. Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.